I'm not suggesting that it wasn't a major infraction. Syracuse.com uses the term unserviceable, the vehicle. All I'm saying is we don't know. If the vehicle had been 100% inspected and a crash of that magnitude had happened, we could have still been sitting here.
Remember, you're quoting, everything I've read is quoting the governor who spoke at a parade on Monday, a Columbus Day parade, who said the vehicle was inspected and failed inspection last month and it shouldn't have been on the road. So the attorney came out and said, well, those problems were corrected last month. So somebody's not telling the truth. And at this point, and maybe it's out there in another story, but I haven't seen it. It's possible that they corrected the problem and had it certified. It is possible. We don't really know. And your comments are really, you're just trying to say
we don't know.
There's a lot of things that we don't know yet, and chances are that vehicle was in bad shape and shouldn't have been on the road. That's certainly probably what's going to end up happening, but we really don't know that right now.
This is via Syracuse.com. The limousine that had ran the stop sign was cited for code violation September 4, including a problem with the anti-lock brake system, malfunction indicator system. For the Gansevoort, New York-based company, limos were cited for 22 maintenance violations this year, though none were deemed critical. Quote, those safety violations had been addressed and corrected, Kindleton told CBS News. That's the attorney for the company that owns them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Not all infractions are major. A lot of these things are minor and were fixed. However, a State Department of Transportation spokesman said a sticker was placed on the vehicle after the September inspection declaring it unserviceable. He said Kindleton's assertion that the code violations had been corrected and the vehicle was cleared for service was categorically false.
Okay,
Again,
well, there's the answer to that one.
Even if it's categorically false, it doesn't mean whatever the problem was contributed to the accident. We don't know that yet. That's all I'm saying.
I want to bring Ed Welch in on this right now. Good morning, Ed. So at least we have the answer.
Good morning, Bill. Morning, guys.
We do have the answer to that. So it was not recertified and re-inspected, which it would have to be. So ultimately,
maybe I can shed a little light on some of this.
Yeah.
When you have 10 passengers or more, the limousine falls into a bus category, and then all the bus inspection rules apply. Okay, which means, first of all, it has to be inspected by a DOT inspector.
And if I could just interrupt, I spoke with a local limousine service who told me that has changed. That
well, I'm reading basically the rules as of today on the DOT website.
Okay,
so
fair enough.
If it's changed, I don't know, but this is what's listed on the DOT.
All I'll add is that he's saying it's now more strict than it was. All limousines have to be DOT certified. But again, who knows?
This is right.
Yeah.
And let me just say this, defects on a limousine or a bus fall into three categories. There's A-rated defect, which puts the vehicle out of service immediately. And no inspection certificate is issued until the defects are repaired. A B-rated defect is issued a certificate, but you've got to have it re-inspected prior to carrying passengers. Then you've got C-rated defects, which, again, has to be fixed, but you've got 15 days to fix it, and you can kind of still operate. So but what needs to be, we'll just say, put out from the story here is exactly what were the defects.
Right.
Was it an A, B, or C? Because I think that's how this gets all mixed up, because depending on the severity of the defect depends on what needed to be done and when it needed to be done. But for sure, the vehicle has to be inspected by a DOT inspector, and that takes 60 to 90 minutes.
Yeah.
But, the bigger issue is that there's really not a whole lot of regulations that govern the building of limousines.
That's the big issue. And when
it's a huge issue, because a stretch limousine, for example, an ordinary car is strictly regulated by the federal government to meet safety standards, not stretch limousines.
Mm-hmm.
And, for example, my understanding is this particular one was a 2001 Ford Excursion when it left, that could seat 9 people when it left the factory, right? Here it is 15, 18 years later, the same vehicle now can hold 18.
Yeah.
How did it get like that? So in other words, who did what to it? And when they build these things, if you think about it, they're cutting vehicles in half, taking the front of it out, the back of it out, and then putting new pieces in the middle and welding it all back up.
Yeah, from what I understand, the only and what gets eliminated a lot of times, side airbags and
exactly.
all
That's
of this
exactly
stuff.
right.
There was a case on the thruway where a limousine was trying to do a U-turn and was hit in the center. It split the limousine. One of these stretches, it split it in half.
Well, and I can tell you this, they have to be handled special when they're being towed. You can't just pick the front end of one of these things up. You'll bend it.
Yeah.
So if you think of structurally, if it bends like that easy, being picked up off the ground 6 inches, what else can happen? So that's why there's such strict regulations on inspecting these things, because there really isn't a whole lot of regulations on building these things.
So, and not to belabor this point where Manaske was going, but I think what I think you're trying to say here is we could find out that there was an anti-lock brake issue, and whether they corrected it or not, it wasn't reinspected. But we find out the driver had a heart attack, and that's what caused the accident.
Right.
I mean, we don't really know yet what caused the accident. To be fair.
To be fair, we don't know, and it's a horrible tragedy for all these people involved. And what a horrible thing. I mean, you're planning to go to a party, so you decide to do the safe thing and call a limousine, so you're not tempted to have a drink or two and have to get behind the wheel.
Yep.
And then here you are in a limousine thinking you're doing the right thing, and look what happens.
We saw this happen.
It's horrible.
We saw this. Who was the comedian that
Tracy
Morgan? And I'm not sure that was a stretch limousine or if it was more.
It was
of
one
a
of the
bus.
buses. It was
but
a bus.
I got to tell you, we were talking about this on Monday. I've been on a bus and a limousine, in both cases, where the driver was going way too fast, and I thought we were just going to end up in the river. So and seatbelts not required, right, in the back of these?
Correct, and again, according to the New York Times, and I certainly have no other information than that, but they reported that apparently the passengers were not wearing seatbelts. And the question I then thought is, well, was the thing equipped with seatbelts for everybody in the vehicle?
Yeah.
That's just an open question.
We also have, again, we're all building our own story without knowing the NTSB's final results, but there was a story in maybe the Washington Post that said that one of the people who were ultimately killed, a lady inside the limousine, texted her mom and said, "This vehicle is in awful shape." And you might expect that, right? It's a 2001, but don't we all kind of we can form our own conclusions, I guess, and we're going to. But don't you kind of feel like, from what we understand, they were supposed to have a bus. The bus broke down. The limo company's like, oh, my God, we can't leave these people stranded. I've got one. We could probably fit 17 people in that one. And that's not supposed to be on the road, but we'll be fine. Let's not lose the money. Let's not lose the business. And that's kind of what it seems like we might find out. We don't know for sure, but it does seem to be heading in that direction, Ed.
Oh, and the other alternative always is, people in that business work together.
Yeah.
I have a mechanical issue today. I've got a party. Do you have a car available? You call one of the neighboring companies and you ask for assistance. And that's fairly common in a lot of the livery-type businesses. So there is these aren't that many of these guys in that business. So I assume they all know each other, and hopefully they work together when they can.
And I got to ask you a quick question. You made a comment earlier. You said, like, for instance, if you were going to tow one of these vehicles, you can't because the way the weight is distributed, if you propped it up like that, it would bend. If anyone listening to this, if you Google a 2001 Ford Excursion limo, if you look at it, you'll get the feel of how long it is.
It's long.
One of the things that strikes me is there's got to be, I don't know, I'll guess 60 feet, 80 feet between the tires. Is there no restriction on for X number of feet you need? Like, this vehicle looks like it needs another set of tires or two in the middle. Is there no restriction on that, or no regulation on that?
There's literally no regulations on these things. Yeah. I have seen limousines built out of trucks where I've seen two sets of rear axles, like you just said.
Yep, I've seen that too.
And they build these things as novelty vehicles. I can have a 23 passenger, and you can have an 18 passenger, but really the real issue is if the vehicle was originally designed, let's just say the 8 or 9 passenger one, which was designed by Ford. That meets all specs.
Right.
When you chop that thing in half and stretch it out 10 feet, now, of course, what happens? Now, admittedly, coach builders try to build them as safe as they can. But to your point, Bill, side airbags, a lot of things structurally aren't there anymore.
Here's another question.
They're not DOT certified. In other words, they didn't go through the same rigorous federal inspections as a regular car. And when you buy a Cadillac limousine or a Lincoln limousine, normal size, that's no different than your personal car that's gone through all the federal regs. Once the coach builder gets it and starts stretching it out, there are some industry standards, but you don't really know what's going on there. I mean, they're making it taller, wider, longer, and all that. Were the same engineers that designed the car involved with this process? I don't think so.
I took a bus to Daytona Beach when I was in college, and so it's a straight bus to Daytona from up here. It left Cortland. It left from Cortland, and 2 drivers. That was required, and that was back in '83 or '84. 2 drivers required. It's an interesting story about those 2 drivers, but I won't get into that.
My guess is Florida has different set of rules, and I think I could tell you that New York State has looked at some rules, and Senator Schumer has called for more regulation.
Well, that's coming. But my question here is, there are rules on tractor trailer drivers? I mean, those are really strict rules on how long they can drive, how much sleep they need, all of that. Are there any in New York State when it comes to a limousine driver?
Well, these guys are supposed to be like bus drivers.
Yeah.
So if you think of what governs a school bus driver, as far as their ability to do things, the same thing applies.
Yeah.
So again, you've got to have special, we'll just say, addition to your license, and then you have to meet those standards. Again, we don't know the story with the driver of the vehicle, and certainly that'll all come out down the road here. But I think the tragedy is so horrific that I think everyone wants to understand how it happened and why it happened, which leads to a lot of speculation. I think to your point earlier, Bill, we're going to have to wait till the TSB looks at everything.
Yeah. I mean, the good part of this is that the NTSB does not investigate most accidents in New York State. It takes a really big accident, and unfortunately, that's what this was. So we do have the luxury of a real thorough investigation on this thing, and it'll be coming out. I don't think it'll be that long before we get some information. So, Ed, of course...
No, and the limousine does have some capability of tracking what it did with a black box, so we'll see what that data says as well.
Want to make
could have been a brake failure. It could have been a guy having a heart attack. It could be a lot of things.
Quick prediction. That there's going to be some legislator very, very soon proposing new regulations on limousines. That is going to be happening in Albany. You just know it's coming.
Well, you do. And, there was a similar accident down Long Island in 2016, and the district attorney down there, Thomas Spada, he was quoted as saying, without sufficient safety standards in place, there's nothing but a fine line between a stretch limo and a hearse. Boy, isn't that interesting. Ed Welch's Auto Talk is on Saturday mornings on WIBX, and you learn a lot. Ed, we really appreciate your time. Ed from AAA as well. Thanks so much. Hey, appreciate you guys having me on this morning.
Right.
Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.